Good morning. Welcome, everyone. I'm Audrey Gale Hall, Membership Coordinator here at Emerson Unitarian Universalist Church in Houston, Texas. Our beloved community of faith, reason, and affection welcomes all to grow in mind and spirit as together we build a new world. If you're joining us for the first time this morning, we extend a special welcome and invite you to fill out our visitor card, which is the yellow card in your pew or when you walked in the front door, so that you can receive more information about Emerson and our activities. And if you fill that out, you can drop it in the basket on your right on the way out that door. Again, welcome to all. We are a church in many places, so some of us are here in the pews and others are joining through Zoom. Wherever you're joining from, welcome. Our world is different than it was 2 years ago. Our worship has changed accordingly. People on site are sitting in every other pew with space between families, and we've put a few offertory baskets at the front and the back of the sanctuary. Those are here on my left and right, and then in the very back in the center. And those are for you to drop off their offering during the service instead of passing the plate. We're also keeping our masks on to reduce risk, unless we're speaking from the microphone, especially as we are now inviting everyone to join in singing instead of humming or swaying or whatever you were doing. This is a reminder to silence your cell phone before we got started. I just did it. Please do switch it off. Following the worship service, if you're in the pews, you can head out to the courtyard for social time. We'll also have social time on Zoom, y'all who are joining online. And that's a chance for you to gather in smaller groups to discuss the service and what's going on in your lives. Folks online, if you're scrambling for the link, you can find it in your e-blast, which should have gotten to your inbox this morning. This morning, our pulpit guest is the Reverend Carmen Emerson, who's joining us via Zoom. Reverend Carmen is a hospital chaplain in Amelia Island, Florida, following service to congregations in New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Tennessee. She was with us last summer, and we're so glad to have her back. So she'll be talking to us after this prelude.
There are a lot of moving pieces to the service this morning, so I want to just thank you in advance for your patience and your grace as we do this. I have a Kindle and a cell phone and a laptop in front of me, and I hope I don't get confused. So again, thank you for your grace and your patience as we bring you this service this morning. Welcome, whoever you are, wherever you come from, wherever you find yourself on life's journey, whichever your pronouns, whether you've walked in or rolled in or dialed in, whether you listen with your ears or your eyes or your heart, whomever you love, you are welcome here. This morning's opening words are by Robert Carmen. The spiritual center of our lives is not to be found in a faith, no matter how cherished or revered. It comes rather out of the openness and honest engagement, the courage and the pain and the love we experience with one another. Out of it comes a vision of a world made new by the reality of our lives, lived in the service of love and justice, of gentle goodness and forgiveness. We now will light the chalice this morning. These words by William Schultz, they're number 459 in the hymnal if you ever want to look at them again. This is the mission of our faith, to teach the fragile art of hospitality, to revere both the critical mind and the generous heart, to prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness, and to witness to all that we must hold the whole world in our hands. Would you please join me in singing? Doesn't that feel good to say that and feel that? Would you please join me in singing our opening hymn, number 126, Come, Thou Fount of Every Blessing.
Stories that exist across cultures. We're not sure if they independently arrived at these stories or if tradesmen took these stories from country to country to country. Today's story I've seen versions of from the British Isles, from Peru, from Tokyo, and from Nigeria. I'm going to tell the Nigerian version. All of them have something about stolen aroma. This one's called the stolen soup aroma. It had been a hard year. The woman had always been poor, but this year her garden had failed, her chickens had died. All she was left with was a daily meal of a paste, a porridge made from cassava. It was filling. It had lots of fiber. It had some vitamins, but it pretty much didn't taste like anything. She would think sometimes about what delicious things she would usually spoon on top of that cassava paste. How she would breathe it in and then scoop up a little with her fingers and eat it. And then she smelt something more than her imagination could possibly have created. Her neighbor in the next hut was making a beautiful stew of ground nuts and vegetables and, ooh, a few slices of beef? Oh. Well, she didn't really know this neighbor, but she was so ready to taste something again. She went with her little bowl to the neighbor's hut and she said, please, could I have just a little bit of your stew to flavor my porridge? The woman looked at her, perhaps a bit haughtily, and said, if you have not grown the crops, if you do not earn the things to make stew, well then, you don't get stew. This is my stew. I worked hard for it. The woman walked back to her hut, sat on a little chair beside her door. You know, she could still smell that beautiful stew. So she'd take her pinch of cassava, take in a deep breath of that stew, and well, that was better than nothing. It got to the point where every day she would smell the neighbor's cooking, and she'd rush to make her little bowl and go sit down on that little stool. And then the neighbor noticed. Oh, this made her mad. This woman had stolen the aroma of her stew. She went to the village leader and she said, this is this horrible wrong that has happened to me. She is stealing this smell. I demand justice. Well, that village leader, there were reasons he was the leader. He was a wise man. People trusted his judgment. And he thought for a minute. He said, well, looked at the poor woman. Is there some way you could pay her? Do you have coins? No, sir, I have no coins. Do you have perhaps a chicken? No, they died. Well, justice must be done. And I'm afraid that if you cannot pay her for what you have taken, a beating is in order. He handed a large stick to the wealthier woman, and he said, whenever you see her do this, from now on, take this stick and beat her shadow. She didn't really think about it, but the man had given her a stick, so she went off to her hut. The other woman went off to her hut, and maybe for a couple of days she was a little fearful and ate inside, but soon enough that smell was just too intoxicating. She went out on the stew. She smelled. The woman across the way got angry. She came out with that stick, and just as she was striking the woman's shadow for the first time, the ridiculousness of the situation hit her. And then she felt that pang of shame. Oh. She set down the stick. She went into her hut. She came out with her pot of stew, and she ladled some into that bowl. She said, please, whenever you are hungry, come. I can share my stew. Thus endeth our story.
out of what is our own is a transformative act. As a community of faith, we collect an offering, not for ourselves or our congregation, but to give to others as a collective action of our community and as a way to live out our shared values. So today, please give with a generous heart to support our April Share the Plate recipient, Texas Environmental Justice Advocacy Services, or TEJAS. TEJAS educates communities about health concerns arising from pollution and empowers all to advocate for the enforcement of environmental laws and regulations through effective community action. And you can learn more later, or if you're on Zoom now, at tejasbarrios.org. Local UU churches are teaming up to hire a coordinator for our upcoming UU The Vote effort. We found a coordinator very helpful in 2020, and we hope to improve on our record in this important election year. Emerson's share is $3,000, and so special donations are appreciated. Checks should be made out to Emerson UU Church, earmarked UU The Vote Coordinator. While our Share the Plate offerings will temporarily go to this account instead of Meals on Wheels. Let's all pitch in and make this happen. We have 4 ways to give. You can text the number on the screen, go to our webpage for online giving, or you can put it in our offering baskets. You can also mail a check to the church. And if you're here on YouTube for our online giving portal, you can see that link in the chat for emersonhouston.org/give.
This morning's meditation is by Marge Piercy. It's called To Be of Use. Just invite you to relax into the word, to relax into your presence there with one another. The words of Marge Piercy. I want to be with people who submerge in the task, who go into the fields to harvest and work in a row and pass the bags along, who stand in the line and haul in their places, who are not parlor generals and field deserters, but move in a common rhythm when the food must come in or the fire be put out. The work of the world is common as mud. Botched, it smears the hands, crumbles to dust, but the thing worth doing well done has a shape that satisfies, clean and evident. Greek amphoras for wine or oil, Hopi vases that held corn are put in museums, but you know they were made to be used. The pitcher cries for water to carry and a person for work that is real. Amen. This morning's reading is by a Unitarian minister named Jack Mendelson. It's from a book he wrote, Being Liberal in an Illiberal Age. It's an oldie but a goodie, and some of you may be familiar with this. Who is a Unitarian Universalist minister? A person who is never completely satisfied or satisfiable, never completely adjusted or adjustable, who walks in two worlds, one of things as they are, the other of things as they ought to be, and loves them both. A UU minister is a person with a pincushion soul and an elastic heart who sits with the happy and the sad in a chaotic pattern of laugh, cry, and who knows deep down that the first time the laughter is false or the tears are make-believe, his or her days as a real minister are over. UU ministers have dreams they can never wholly share, partly because they have some doubts about those dreams themselves, and partly because they are unable adequately to explain, describe, or define what it is they think they see and understand. A UU minister continually runs out of time, out of wisdom, out of ability, out of courage, and out of money. A UU minister is hurtable, with great responsibility and little power, who must learn to accept people where they are and go on from there. UU ministers who are worth their salt know all this and are still thankful every day for the privilege of being what they are. The future of the liberal church is almost totally dependent on two factors: great congregations, whether large or small, and skilled, effective, dedicated minister. The strangest feature of their relationship is that they create one another.
I know you're weary, and your eyes want to close. The days are getting longer, we're not getting any stronger. Trust me, Mama knows. But lie in my arms while you're sleeping, and think of the rivers you've crossed. I'll tell you the dreams I've been keeping for a moment like this, when your hope is lost. Hear my song, it'll help you believe in tomorrow. Hear my song, it'll show you the way you can shine. Hear my song, it was made for the time when you don't know where to go. Listen to the song that I sing. You'll be fine. I know you're frightened and your throat parched and dry, but just trust in Mama singing and the gift tomorrow's bringing. Trust it, don't have to lie. Just lie in my arms and I'll tell you the things that you know but forget, the lies no one ever could tell you. I know that it's hard, but don't give up yet, 'cause I'll be singing, hold on, hold tight. I know it's dark right now, but just believe somehow that we'll help you out.
Wow, that was beautiful. So I love the invitation and the confidence expressed in the Jack Mendelson reading I shared a few moments ago. I'll paraphrase the invitation this way. Great congregations and great ministers create and sustain one another by way of our relationship with one another. Relationship is at the heart of everything we do and are as a covenantal faith tradition rather than a creedal or doctrinal one. So our UU congregations are never all about you and never all about your minister, but rather are all about the relationship between and among us, relationships that include, from this morning's opening words, openness and honest engagement, courage and pain, and love we experience with one another. Speaking as a minister, there's nothing so wonderful as such a relationship with your congregation. It is what you dream of finding when you say yes to the call of ministry, and through every single step of ministerial formation and preparation that leads you to say yes to a congregation that says to you as a minister, would you be ours for a while? I believe that it is the recognition of this sacred relationship of openness and honest engagement with our congregation that grants us, finally, the ministerial authority entrusted to us. In this morning's meditation, March Piercy spoke of pitchers that cry out for water to carry and people for work that is real, and this is what ministers long for too. Work that is real, honest, true. As Jack Mendelson wrote, the moment ministers are false about any of it, our ministry is over. Jack's statement about great congregations and great ministers making one another is so hopeful and positive, and yet I would be remiss if I did not take a brief moment to acknowledge that the inverse is also true. Misconducting ministers can damage potentially great congregations, sometimes for decades, and toxic congregations who shelter mean-spirited people can grind away the hopeful spirit of even the most skilled, effective, determined ministers who eventually will have their hearts broken one too many times to stay. Either way, in such sad and avoidable circumstances, no one gets to be great. We all just get to hurt, and the potential for great shared ministry is dimmed. It takes a long time to recover. None of us want that. So let's be clear about tending greatness. What is it that we can expect of each other as ministers and congregations in covenantal relationship, ministers and congregations longing for healthy shared ministry, ministers and congregations hoping to be great to and for each other? What must we do? And who must we be as ministers to lead and serve great congregations who make a difference not only in the lives of those who say, this is my church and this is my minister, but also to the lives of those in the communities in which our congregations dwell and serve and have their being? And what must we do and who must we be as a congregation who helps to teach, support, and love into being a skilled, effective, dedicated minister who never takes for granted the privilege of serving a healthy, transformative, great congregation? Many UU ministers I know are smart, compassionate, well-spoken, well-written, well-informed, intuitive, inspirational, strategic, relatable, skilled, accessible, and insightful servant leaders. That's a lot, and I think that our congregations long to be served and led by ministers with all of these great attributes. But none of that will matter, and certainly will not matter for long if we as ministers are not trustworthy. You must be able to trust your minister. In addition to all those other great characteristics, your minister must first and always be a trustworthy person of integrity. And the way that you as a congregant will know that your minister is a trustworthy person of integrity is that your minister will tell you the truth, even when it is hard to say or to hear, even when it is risky, even when it makes you uncomfortable, even when it invites or even compels us as congregants towards change. Your minister will tell you the truth. You must expect your minister to tell you the truth. Truth-telling is the core contribution of a great minister to a great, healthy, effective, sustainable shared ministry. But to risk telling you the truth, your minister has to know in heart and mind and spirit and also at gut level that your congregation is a safe one in which the truth can actually be told. And that brings us to what you as a congregation can do to help create that healthy, effective, sustainable shared ministry between a great congregation and a great minister. You can make it safe for truth-telling. You covenant with your minister and with one another to be more willing than resistant to emerging truths and the transformations that inevitably follow. So how do you do this? The first thing you can do to be a safe congregation committed to healthy and effective shared ministry is to understand that your minister cannot be your friend. This is a hard one because ministers long to be close to our congregants, and congregants often long to be close to their ministers. We can be friendly, we can be pastoral with our congregants, and we will care about you deeply and hopefully for a long, long time. But there will always be a power differential between minister and congregant. There will always be ethical lines that healthy ministers cannot and will not cross, the same way that trusted physicians and trusted therapists will not cross such healthy boundaries. Ministry can be a very lonely business, and sometimes it is our greatest temptation to seek solace and comfort through friendships in the congregation. So please, don't put pressure on your minister to be your special friend. Please don't expect to be the exception to the rule. Rather, honor the boundaries that your minister puts into place for healthy, trusting relationships with emphasis on trust, because trust is at the core of healthy, sustaining, shared ministries with great congregations and great ministers of integrity who risk telling you the truth every time. Trust relies on good and transparent communication, and that's the second thing to pay attention to as you are working together to create and sustain the shared ministries of great congregations and great minister. Communication. Yes, policies are important and will help guide the ways you communicate, but I am inviting you to go deeper, to understand that there is a spiritual maturity inherent in respectful communications. And even when we are in disagreement, because healthy congregations and ministers will sometimes disagree, that even when we are in disagreement, respectful communications can make and save relationships, whereas disrespectful communications will break them. Often our disrespectful communications as congregants are rooted in the need to prove ourselves right, which can morph into a righteous entitlement to say anything in service to our agenda, especially if our agenda includes resisting a truth that invites us to deeper and wider understandings about ourselves, a truth that precedes changing something about ourselves or the congregation, even something that has always been this way. As we have all probably experienced, the wrong words delivered in the wrong way can forever damage the trust between us. Ministers have a responsibility to check in with mentors, colleagues, and therapists to help us stay healthy and to engage in spiritually mature communications with our congregants. Every minister I know has heard back away from the keyboard or take your thumbs off the text before someone really gets hurt, and the words can never be taken back. We always want to leave room for reconciliation and redemption. So it's good for congregants to adopt a back away from the keyboard strategy too. Such damage can be done by email threads that begin by talking about another person in the congregation, including the minister, and they snowball out of control every minor dissatisfaction with minister, personnel, policy, or program suddenly scrutinized and elevated into either or fatalistic defenses of I'm totally right, they're totally wrong. Please don't do that. Please don't be that person that insists on being right. Rather, find a way to talk to the other person, including your minister, face to face if possible. To quote Brené Brown, it is hard to hate people close up, and that's because when we are face to face, we are reminded of our shared humanity. And yes, your minister will always be human. We're reflecting this morning on creating and sustaining healthy, effective, great shared ministries between congregation and minister, and tending the trust that must be present between us for that to happen. You must trust that your minister will tell you the truth. Your minister must trust that it is safe to do so, that their ministry will not be jeopardized by their integrity. You as a congregation create a safe place for such truth-telling, first by respecting the healthy boundaries of your minister, and second by communicating respectfully with the minister and with one another, even and especially during times of challenge and disagreement. There is a third element of healthy, effective, and great shared ministry between safe congregations and trustworthy ministers of integrity, and that is the practice of being generous with your curiosity, your courage, and your compassion, and being frugal with your criticism. And by the way, I just want to say this. If your criticism is mean-spirited, it will land as mean-spirited, even if you label it constructive criticism. So as part of your spiritual maturity as a congregant, hoping to sustain healthy and effective shared ministry, don't be mean to get your way. And if you're witnessing such mean-spirited behavior in a fellow congregant, don't dismiss it just because, that's just the way they are and have always been. Call them back into covenant before they damage your potential for great shared ministries. So, being generous with your courage, your curiosity, your courage, your compassion, and frugal with your criticism. Think about those illustrations for healthy eating. The ones that show a plate labeled healthy diet, and the biggest serving on the plate is reserved for vegetables. And then the next biggest serving on the plate is reserved for grains. And the next biggest serving is reserved for fruit. And finally, the smallest serving is reserved for proteins. So imagine instead a plate that says healthy shared ministry, and let your curiosity take up that largest space on the plate. I wonder is a great way to start a conversation in building a trusted and great shared ministry. Then, let courage take up the next largest space on the plate. I am willing to do, or to try, or to learn begins a very courageous statement that could lead to amazing things for healthy and great shared ministries. And what an example for your fellow congregants and also for the children and youth of your congregation who are watching and learning from you every moment that you're together. Compassion takes up the next largest space on the plate. I feel connected to what's happening and am moved to act in this way because I recognize our shared humanity. And finally, that smallest spot on the plate is reserved for your criticism. I'm discomforted by this thing that is happening or this thing that was said, and I'm trying to figure it out. Could you give me some space and time? Could you talk it out with me? Find someone you trust, not necessarily someone who agrees with you, but someone you trust, and talk it out. These are what I think of as the 4 C's of healthy shared ministries that help create great congregations and great ministers. Curiosity, courage, compassion, and criticism, and they work so well with the first 2 points we talked about in making a safe place for your minister to tell the truth. Let the 4 C's guide the way you respectfully communicate with one another and with your minister, and then use them to strengthen the healthy boundaries of shared ministry, all in service to being a great congregation and a great minister, for each helps to create and sustain the other. And God knows we are in need of great and healthy shared ministries. So may it be so, and may we be so. Amen. Would you please join me in body or in spirit as we sing our closing hymn? It's number 318 in the great hymnal, We Would Be One. We leave this gathered community, but we don't leave our connections, our concerns, our care for each other. Our service to each other, to the world, and to our faith continues until we are together again, friends. Be strong, be well, be true, be loving. Blessed be.
Thank you so much, Reverend Carmen, for visiting us today. Y'all can be seated. I just have a few announcements before we break for social time, which is out in the courtyard or on Zoom. So the first announcement is that if you're a visitor or a greeter or a congregation member who just wants to see what my office looks like, we have open house after service at 12:30. So if you want to meet me around the stairs right outside here on the first floor, at about 12:30, we'll head upstairs for an open house. The other two announcements are that on April 30th, we have our Kilgore lecture. And there is an RSVP required, so if you need to get hooked up, find myself or Ellen after the service. I'm not sure if Ellen's here. And also on May 1st at 12:30 is our next congregational meeting. So if you want to take part in decision-making about the search committee, please for sure show up to that meeting or talk about setting up a proxy vote for yourself. There are also handouts in the gathering place with more information on the meeting. But that's all the announcements today, so I'm going to leave us with our postlude.